Thank you for joining us around the fire. Now, want to hear a scary story?
Once upon a time, in a kingdom cloaked by forests, dark and wild, there lived a queen who longed for a child. Though she prayed to the heavens and sought counsel from the wise, her womb remained barren and her heart grew heavy. One winter's evening, as the first snow fell, she sat by her chamber window and made a terrible vow. "Let the snow take my blood," she whispered. "Let it drink my offering, and if it will grant me a child, I care not the cost." She took a small dagger and drew it across her palm. The crimson drops fell like rubies from the windowsill, hungrily swallowed by the snow. The white turned red, then black, and for a moment she thought the snow shifted just a bit, though no wind stirred the air. Days passed, and the queen began to feel the stirrings of life within her. But the joy she felt was sharp and fleeting, for her dreams were plagued by visions of a barefoot child walking on frozen ground, surrounded by black trees that wept blood. Yet, when she woke, drenched in sweat, she dismissed the dreams as foolishness and caressed the scar across her palm, for at last her deepest wish would be fulfilled. As the months dragged on, the queen's health began to wane. Her skin became ashen, her voice grew weak, and the spark of life in her eyes dimmed away. The midwives whispered among themselves that they had never seen a pregnancy so strange. When the child finally came, it was in the dead of night, beneath a blood moon. The queen screamed once, twice, then fell silent as the babe emerged. The midwives delivered the child with trembling hands, a girl with a tuft of silver hair atop her tiny head, as if kissed by the frost that drank her mother's blood. And the queen, now lifeless, lay with her face turned toward the window, her lips frozen in a faint smile, as the sun began to rise. As the grief-stricken king looked upon his newborn daughter, he declared the child's name to be Snow White. And the beautiful baby sat there in the morning sunlight, the perfect child they'd always wanted. And it was summer, warm, beautiful summer. The child grew, and with each passing year, her beauty became more unnatural. The servants whispered that she never cried as a babe, not even when the winter winds howled like starving wolves. Instead, she would stare silently, or smile charmingly, and steal away the hearts of those whose lucky eyes found her. But not all who saw little Snow White were bewitched by the young girl's shimmering eyes and smile. Eventually, the king took himself another wife, a woman of breathtaking beauty, with flawless features sharp enough to cut glass, and a regal bearing that commanded the very air around her. She had no love for the king, nor for the kingdom she now ruled. Her only passion was her own reflection, which she gazed upon in a mirror of polished obsidian, its surface as dark and impenetrable as her soul. The ancient looking-glass was framed in blackened gold, adorned with twisting serpents with red eyes. Every morning, the queen stood before it, looked at herself, and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of the land?" To this the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." And she was satisfied, for she knew that the mirror could only speak the truth. More time passed, and from the moment she could walk, Snow White easily enchanted all she encountered. Her shining hair gleamed even on the grayest of days, and though untouched by time, it remained the purest shade of fresh fallen snow under a winter moon. Her skin was perfect and luminous, and her plumping lips the color of ripe cherries. Servants paused their work to marvel at her. Foreigners brought tales of her beauty back to their lands, claiming no other princess could compare. But the wicked queen's mirror, the only reflecting surface she permitted in the castle, was poison to all eyes but her own. The handsome king, a man of noble bearing and strong features, would look into the glass to see a hideous ogre staring back at him. And little Snow White, beautiful and perfect as she was, saw a pale, deathly girl in the mirror, gaunt and hollow-eyed, and it filled her with horrible dread. "Stepmother," Snow White would cry, "I hate to see the sight of my own reflection so much. One day, I hope to be as beautiful as you." The queen's lips curved into a smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "Perhaps one day after I am long gone," she said, her voice low and honeyed with false warmth, "you will be the prettiest in all the land." But her stepmother could not bear the adoration that Snow White received, nor how the air seemed to brighten in her presence. And every smile and sneaking glance became a thorn in her side, and her hatred of the little girl grew with every passing day. The princess's beauty was not hers to control, and this truth, more than any, festered in her heart like a venomous rot. At night, the queen would stand before the mirror, curling her claws around its gilded frame. Her reflection looked back, beautiful and unyielding, but that was no longer enough. "Mirror on the wall," she would ask, "who is the fairest of the land?" The mirror's surface rippled like pooled ink, as it said, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." "Snow White?" The woman spat the name like poison from her tongue, clenching her fists so angrily that her long nails drew blood. "Snow White?" And in the darkness of her chamber, the wicked queen began to plot. One day, Snow White came to her stepmother with wildflowers, her hair catching the golden light of the throne room as she approached. "Stepmother," she said innocently, "I picked these for you." The queen accepted the flowers, her fingers brushing against Snow White's for the briefest of moments. "How lovely," she said through her jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Snow White curtsied and turned away, skipping toward the gardens once more as her laughter rang through the air like wind chimes. The queen watched her go, her chest heaving with suppressed hatred, and the flowers withered and blackened in her grasp. The next morning, the queen summoned a huntsman to her chambers, a broad-shouldered man weathered by years of labor across the lands, with hands thickly calloused from wielding axe and knife. She commanded him to take Snow White out into the woods. "Kill her," she said, "and to prove that you've done it, bring me back her heart." The huntsman's loyalty to the crown was unwavering, but still he hesitated, for Snow White was just more than a child, innocent and kind. But he dared not disobey, for the queen was renowned for her wrath. So he bowed his head and left the queen alone with her dark thoughts. She traced her fingers over her own face in the magic mirror. "A pure heart," she whispered to herself, "untouched by wickedness, untouched by sin." The queen reached into her vanity and drew forth an ancient tome, its leather cover cracked with age, its pages yellowed and brittle. She turned to a page marked with a blood-red ribbon and read the jagged script in some long-forgotten language older than the castle itself. "Eat of the heart, and youth shall return, as does spring after winter snow. The flesh will mend, the soul will thrive, and beauty reigns eternal." Her hands trembled as she closed the book, the weight of its promise filling her chest with dark delight. She imagined her face restored to its most youthful beauty, her essence surpassing even that of the gods. Snow White, with her cursed hair, would be the vessel of her rebirth. "Soon," she hissed, "I shall be fairest of all." The huntsman led Snow White deep into the woods, beyond the sunlight, where the trees grew taller, and a chill settled in the air, though it was not the chill of winter. At last, they reached a clearing, and the huntsman turned to face the girl. "Why have we come here, huntsman?" she asked. "Forgive me, princess," he said, drawing his knife. Snow White stepped back, her small hands raised. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "Don't hurt me." For a moment, the knife faltered in his hand, but before he could decide, Snow White darted into the woods, her feet light as a doe's. She ran blindly, branches clawing at her arms and face, and gnarled roots rising up to trip her. Behind her, the huntsman shouted, his voice growing louder as he closed the distance. Spying a fallen branch thick with moss, Snow White snatched it up and hid behind a tree, her small frame trembling as she listened for his heavy footfalls approaching. When the huntsman appeared, Snow White leapt from the shadows with a cry, swinging the branch with all her strength and striking him squarely in the side of his head, and he stumbled, collapsing to his knees. The knife fell from his hand, skittering across the forest floor to the little feet of Snow White. The huntsman looked up at her, his face streaked with dirt. "Spare me," he pleaded. "Spare me, as I would have spared you." The princess stood over him. "Leave me be, then," she said, dropping the branch. "Go, and never come for me again." Before the huntsman could rise, thick black vines shot forth from the forest, wrapping around his legs and arms, He screamed as they tightened, struggling to free himself, but it was no use. The earth itself had come to claim him, dragging him violently across the ground. Thorny tendrils snagged and lurched, ripping into his pores and snaking into his veins. Snow White dared one final glance over her shoulder as she fled. The huntsman's broken body dangled high among the branches like a tangled marionette, his face locked forever in a silent scream. Then a great hawk descended, and with a sudden, violent motion, plunged its talons into the huntsman's chest and tore out his heart, before taking to the sky once again with a piercing cry, leaving a trail of blood below. The queen in her chambers turned sharply at the sound of a soft thud upon her dressing table. There, amid her perfumes and jewels, lay a fresh, human heart, still slick with dark blood. She stared at it, glistening in the dim light, and her lips parted in thrill. "At last," she whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for the organ. It was still warm as she pressed it to her lips. "At last, I shall have her heart." The queen called for a servant and bade him visit the king's chambers with the dreadful news of his young daughter's death in the forest. As the servant departed, she turned her gaze to the hearth, where a small cauldron bubbled, and carefully placed the meat into the broth. She sprinkled a handful of salt crystals like snow onto the organ, and with a bone-handled ladle, she began to stir. The gurgling stew filled the room with the metallic sense of death and despair, and the queen watched her concoction simmer as low hunger rumbled in the pit of her stomach. "Beauty eternal," she murmured, ladling out the tender and steaming heart onto a shining golden plate. She used a silver knife to cut into the flesh. The meat was soft, rich and succulent, almost sickly sweet, and the wicked queen savored each bite, with her eyes half closed in ecstasy, until the plate was as spotless as her own visage. She leaned back in her chair, her laughter echoing through the stone halls. "Snow White is no more," she said to herself, "and I am once again the fairest of all." Meanwhile, deep in the forest, far across the kingdom, the poor princess ran on without daring to look back. Just as her legs threatened to give way, she saw a small figure ahead. No, not a figure, but a house. It was a little cottage, barely more than a silhouette against the darkening sky. Its thatched roof sagged slightly, and its wooden walls were weathered and worn, and Snow White carried herself, numb with exhaustion, to the little front door. Her small fist rapped against the wood 3 times, and she waited, but no answer came. She knocked again, louder this time, her voice cracking as she called out, "Please, is anyone there?" Still, there was no reply. With no other choice, she pushed open the door. The room inside was dim and cold. A small table stood at the center, covered with a snow-white cloth that looked as if it had never known a stain. 7 little plates sat upon it, each with a spoon resting neatly beside it, and 7 knives and forks and 7 mugs. Against the far wall, 7 little beds stood in perfect formation, each one covered with blankets smooth and untouched. Snow White hesitated, but her hunger outweighed her unease. She moved to the table and took a small piece of bread from each plate, and nibbled on a few vegetables and drank a small sip of wine from each mug. When she finished and her eyelids fluttered with drowsiness, she moved to the beds. The first bed was too long, the second too sunken in, and the third was too soft. It wasn't until she reached the seventh bed that she found one just right. The cool blankets soon warmed around her as she curled into a ball, spilling her silver hair across the pillow, and closed her eyes, drifting off to sleep. After dark, the masters of the house returned home. They were 7 little men who mined for ore in the mountains. They filled the cottage one by one and lit their 7 candles, when one said, "Who has sat in my chair?" Then a second voice cried, "Who has sipped from my mug?" Then a third and a fourth, until all 7 shouted, "Who has eaten my vegetables? Who has eaten my bread? Who has touched my plate, my fork, my knife?" And there, lying in the 7th bed, was the girl, her chest rising and falling with each quiet breath. Her hair, white as freshly fallen snow, spread across the pillow like a soft frozen veil. The dwarves cried out in amazement. Such an ethereal beauty had appeared from nowhere, asleep in their home, and they could hardly believe their eyes. They gathered around the bed, their candles casting golden light over her. "Who is she?" one of the little men whispered. "Where did she come from?" asked another. "She looks like a princess," murmured a third. "But what is a princess doing here in our cottage?" The fourth man shook his head. "No matter the reason, we mustn't disturb her." And so they left her there in the 7th bed, and the 7th dwarf would sleep with his companions, switching beds every hour until the sun came. The next morning Snow White awoke, and when she saw the 7 dwarves she was frightened. But they were friendly, with faces that were kind and curious, and one of them asked her name. The princess sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. "I am Snow White," she said softly. Then she told them that her stepmother had tried to kill her, and that she had run the entire day, finally coming upon their house. The dwarves said, "If you will cook, make the beds, wash, sew, and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly, then you can stay with us, and you shall have everything that you want." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart." Far away in the cold stone halls of the castle, the queen awoke that morning feeling strange. Surely the effects of the wicked meal had manifested, and she rose from her bed, eager to see her beauty restored and youth renewed. But when she stood before the magic mirror, disgust filled her heart. The face that stared back at her was sallow and sunken, deeply marked by lines of age and pocked with craters. A terrible fury rose within the queen, and her scream echoed through the castle halls. She had been deceived. The princess had outwitted her. The heart she had consumed was not Snow White's. When her servant appeared, the queen beckoned him to summon the king, for she would command him to speak of her beauty, to affirm her perfection, as she had done countless times before. But the servant did not move with the usual haste. Instead, he looked at her grimly, his face pale with sorrow. "My queen," he began, "upon hearing of Snow White's passing in the forest, the king succumbed to grief too great to bear. The queen stood in silence, the weight of her deeds heavier than the crown upon her brow. "A mistake," she hissed. But the servant was steadfast. "His heart shattered, my queen. Our great king has passed into death's embrace." The queen's breath caught in her throat, and the servant lingered before he bowed his head and retreated. When she was alone, the wicked woman crossed to the magic mirror and said, "Mirror on the wall, where is that filthy little stain on the world, Snow White?" The mirror's surface began to ripple, and the reflection shifted to form an image of a cottage nestled deep in the forest, and inside the little glowing windows sat Snow White, her hair as pale as a winter corpse, her face serene and untouched. A scream tore from the queen's throat, like the howl of a wounded beast. "No!" she gasped, her voice rising to a shriek of fury. The queen slammed her fist against the glass, cracking it slightly, and she stumbled back, gasping for air. Her hand flew to her face, leaving a smear of blood across her cheek. But the wicked queen would not be thwarted by that little brat. She would not be humiliated by a child, and she would not rely on others to do her bidding any longer. Coloring her face with paints and powders, the queen disguised herself as an old peddler. She donned a tattered cloak and filled a basket with little trinkets, and made her way to the house of the 7 dwarves, where she knocked upon the door and called out, "Beautiful wares for sale, for sale!" Snow White, hearing the voice from the window, peeked out. "Good day, dear woman. What do you have for sale?" "Colorful silk corsets," the old woman said, pulling from the folds of her tattered cloak a lace so delicate it shimmered like a spider's web. "This one would suit you perfectly, little girl. Would you like it?" Snow White, innocent and trusting, thought only of the trinkets the woman offered. How kind she must be, she thought, as she unbolted the door and stepped outside. "Child," the peddler cackled, "how delicate you are. Let me lace you up properly." She stepped closer, and before Snow White could speak, the old woman wrapped the lace around the girl's waist, pulling so violently that Snow White gasped, her breath cut short. The silk tightened, choking her more with every tug, as the old woman laughed and laughed. With one final, vicious yank, the lace drew deathly tight, and Snow White crumpled to the ground, lifeless, before the door. The queen stood over her, her lips curled into a grim smile as she looked down at the girl. "At last, all eyes in the kingdom shall again belong to me." Not long afterward, the 7 men came home. How terrified they were when they saw their dear Snow White lying on the ground, not moving at all. They lifted her up, and seeing that she was too tightly laced, they cut the lace in 2. Then, faintly, she began to breathe again, and little by little, she came back to life. When the wicked queen returned to her castle, she went straight to her mirror, certain that her rival was gone, and she herself would be named the fairest of them all. "Mirror on the wall," she asked, "who is the fairest of the land?" The mirror answered once again, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White is still 1,000 times fairer than you." When she heard that, all her blood ran to her heart. "This time," she said, I shall think of something that will destroy her once and for all. With the dark art of witchcraft, the queen forged a comb of poisoned ivory and wrapped herself in yet another disguise, this time as a sweet old woman. When she arrived at the little house, she knocked as she called, "Good wares for sale, for sale!" Snow White, peering out from the window, said, "Go on your way. I'm not allowed to let anyone in." But the woman, with a smile, crooned, "Surely you may take a look." She pulled out the poisoned comb, its sharp, gleaming teeth catching the light, and the child, too trusting and too innocent, saw the comb and admired its delicate craftsmanship, and without further hesitation, opened the door. "Now, let me comb your hair properly." And before Snow White could realize the danger, the cold fangs of the comb sank deep into her scalp, and the effects were instantaneous. Snow White's eyes fluttered, and within moments, she collapsed to the floor. "Now you are finished," said the wicked witch, and she turned and walked away, her ragged cloak billowing behind her like a shadow, leaving little Snow White lifeless on the ground. Fortunately, it was almost evening, and the 7 dwarves soon returned home. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground as if she were dead, they examined her and found the poison comb tangled in her hair. They had scarcely pulled it out when Snow White's eyes opened, and she came to herself once again. "What happened?" she whispered sweetly. "You were poisoned," said the eldest man, and once again they warned her to never open the door for anyone. Back at the castle, the queen stepped before her mirror and said, "Mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of the land?" When the queen heard the mirror's answer, she screamed like a beast and swore, "Snow White will die if it costs me my life." Then she went to her most secret room and fashioned a poisoned apple. From the outside, it was perfect, white with red cheeks, and anyone who saw it would want it. But a single taste of its flesh promised death. The witch disguised herself as a peasant woman and set out across the 7 mountains for the little cottage in the woods. Upon hearing a knock at the door, Snow White stuck her head out the window and said, "I'm not allowed to let anyone in." "Well, that's all right with me," answered the peasant woman. "Here, I'll pass you an apple through the window." "No, thank you," said Snow White. "I cannot accept anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" asked the old woman. "Look, I'll cut the apple in 2. You eat the red half, and I shall eat the white half." Snow White longed for the beautiful fruit, and when she saw that the peasant woman was eating part of it, she could no longer resist, and she stuck her hand out and took the other half of the apple, which had been so artfully made that only the red half was deathly. Snow White barely had a bite in her mouth when she fell to the ground, dead. The queen looked at her with a gruesome stare, laughed loudly, and said, "This time, no one can awaken you." Back at the castle, the magic mirror finally answered, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." And her envious heart was at rest. When the dwarves came home, Snow White was dead. They lifted her up and looked for something poisonous. They undid her laces, they combed her hair, they washed her with water and wine, but nothing helped. The dear princess was gone. They laid her on a platform and sat next to her and mourned for 3 days. Then they were going to bury her, but she still had her beautiful red cheeks and looked as fresh as a living person. Instead, they had a transparent glass coffin made so she could be seen from all sides. They laid her inside, and with golden letters inscribed on it her name, and that she was a princess. Then they put the coffin outside on a mountain, and one of them always stayed with it and watched over her. Now it came to pass that a prince entered these woods, and happened onto the coffin on the mountain with beautiful Snow White in it, and he read what was written on it with golden letters. His heart filled with sorrow and admiration upon seeing her breathtaking beauty. Then he said to the dwarves, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you anything you want for it." But the dwarves answered, "We will not sell it for any gold in the world." Then the prince said, "Then give it to me, for I cannot live without being able to see Snow White's beauty, her rosy cheeks and frosty hair. I will honor her and respect her as my most cherished one." As he thus spoke, the good dwarves felt pity for him and gave him the coffin. The prince had his servants carry it away on their shoulders, but one of them stumbled on some brush, and this dislodged from Snow White's throat the piece of poisoned apple that she had bitten off. Not long afterward, she opened her eyes, lifted the lid from her coffin, and was alive again. "Good heavens!" she cried out. "Where am I?" The prince, overcome with joy, told her what had happened and asked for her hand in marriage, and together they went to his father's castle, and their wedding was planned with great majesty. Snow White's godless stepmother was invited to the feast, and her vanity could not resist the opportunity to show herself in all her finery. She dressed in her most beautiful clothes and glistening jewels, and stood before her mirror. "Mirror on the wall," she said, "who is the fairest of the land?" The mirror answered, "Your reign has ended. Try as you might. The prince's true love is one little Snow White." The witch uttered a curse, and without thinking, seized a nearby candlestick and swung it at the mirror. The glass shattered like thunder, scattering across the room, and the mirror, once her faithful servant, was in ruins. Her reflection was gone. The wicked stepmother did not want to go to the wedding, but she knew she had to see the young queen for herself, to confirm the mirror's terrible truth. And so she began to plot her final act of vengeance. She took a pair of iron shoes, heavy and crude, and bewitched them so they appeared light and pretty. But once laced, their true nature would be revealed. She planned to present them as a wedding gift, but without her magic mirror, the queen's attempts to alter her appearance were clumsy and ineffective. In the end, she buried herself in layers of fabric and hunched over so far that she was nearly horizontal, and headed for the celebration dressed as a beggar woman. When she arrived at the wedding, the guards barred her way, and the wicked witch wept with feigned sorrow. "Please," she begged, "I raised little Snow White from a baby. I shan't miss her wedding day. It would break my heart." The guards exchanged uneasy glances as Snow White herself appeared at the gate, radiant in her wedding gown. "Who are you?" the sweet bride asked gently, eyeing the hunched figure before her. The witch bowed her head. "I have traveled far to see you on this joyous day. I am but a poor woman who once cared for you, my dear." Snow White's memory failed to place the woman, but as she studied her appearance, her kindness outweighed her suspicions. "Let her in," she said to the guards. "It is a day of celebration, and no one should be turned away." The guards stepped aside, and the witch shuffled into the castle. She attempted to give Snow White the shoes right away. "My dear," she sang, "I have brought you a wedding gift. These shoes will make you the most graceful dancer in the land." But Snow White gently shook her head. "Thank you, but let us wait until the first dance. I would not want to spoil the surprise." The witch nodded, her hands tightening around the shoes. She would have to wait, but not for long. Meanwhile, the dwarves who had also been invited to the wedding watched the old woman with sharp eyes, and when they saw the shoes in her hands, they recognized the work of witchcraft. While the queen was distracted, they stole the shoes and threw them into the burning coals of the castle's hearth, hoping to destroy them. But the shoes did not burn. The grand ballroom was filled with music and laughter when the newlywed couple made their entrance after the ceremony. The wicked witch, her patience worn thin, could wait no longer. She pushed her way to the center of the floor, her voice rising above the music. "Servants," she called, "bring Snow White her dancing shoes. She must wear them for the first dance." The room fell silent, and Snow White looked at the woman, and the dwarves stepped forward, gripping the red-hot dancing shoes with large tongs. "These are no gift for a bride," the eldest man declared. "They have been cursed to bring her harm." Before the queen could react, the 7 dwarves surrounded her, taking hold of her limbs and thrusting the shoes onto her feet. Her burning flesh sizzled and smoked as the iron seared her skin, and the witch filled the hall with screams of agony. The cursed shoes forced her to dance, their black magic enchanting her body into frantic, uncontrollable spins. Round and round she whirled, her screams echoing through the ballroom as the heat of the iron burned deeper and the stench of charred flesh filled the air. And still, the wicked witch danced. The woman's horrible, twisted face and terrible, ungodly cries began to thaw away Snow White's buried past, and soon she knew exactly who the beggar woman was. "Stepmother," she whispered. Finally, with one last, horrible screech, the witch stumbled and fell, her charred feet unable to carry her any further. She collapsed on the floor, her body shuddering, as the guests gaped in horror at the fallen queen. The hall was now silent, save for the crackling of the fire and the faint hiss of cooling iron. Snow White stepped forward, her eyes filled with sorrow, as snowflakes, delicate and shimmering, began to flutter around her like little bees with wings of frost. The wedding guests gasped in awe and whispered with wonder as Snow White reached out toward the smoldering witch's form, and her little frozen workers snuffed the flames like a candle. "Let this be an end to her cruelty," she said softly. "May she find peace in death, as we have found peace in life." After a brief and joyous honeymoon, Snow White and her prince returned to their new castle, their hearts light with happiness. The dwarves, ever loyal, arrived soon after, carrying Snow White's old belongings from the wicked queen's castle. Then Snow White, with eyes bright as morning dew, smiled and spoke thus. "You have ever been my true family, and it is only right that you no longer dwell in such a humble place. I know of a grand castle, at last empty of its cruel queen, where far more than 7 bedchambers stand waiting, and more than 7 of every dish lie unused. If it pleases you, dear friends, take it as your own, and let the halls ring with laughter once more." The dwarves looked upon one another with wide, joyous eyes, and a great cheer rose from their throats. In a flurry of excitement, they hurried off to cross the 7 mountains and gather their humble belongings from the little cottage that had served them so well. As Snow White sifted through the remnants of her past, her fingers brushed against something jagged. There, half buried in the dusty trinkets, lay the broken frame of the magic mirror. She lifted it gently, and in that instant, a chill swept through the air. Not of winter, but something much older, something ancient. A sleek layer of ice began to form before her eyes, shimmering faintly like frost on a winter's morn. And soon, the mirror's surface was perfection again. For the first time, Snow White saw her true reflection, not just of her face, but of her very soul. She was no longer the girl who had fled into the woods. She was a queen, and she stood there in the morning sunlight, grown up but a child at heart. And it was summer. Warm, beautiful summer.
It was love at first sight when Peter first laid his eyes on Melody. He was walking his dog through the park on a crisp fall afternoon when they crossed paths. She wore a proper dress with puffed sleeves and a flower in her hair. Below her fashionable umbrella, a beautiful bracelet dangled from her wrist, and several rings decorated each hand. But most interesting was the black velvet ribbon tied around her neck, matching her hair, overflowing from her shoulders like spilled ink. Melody felt the attention and sent a smile Peter's way. That was all the invitation he needed to introduce himself. They spent the entire afternoon circling the park, and she allowed him to walk her home. They made plans to go to the theater that weekend and dinner the following evening. Before they knew it, they were spending nearly all their time together. Each day she looked more beautiful than the last, and each day she wore the black velvet ribbon around her neck. The rest of her adornments would come and go, but Peter never saw her without the ribbon. As she didn't acknowledge it, he hadn't mentioned it either. But every once in a while, the curiosity became unbearable. One evening, they were together in a beautiful restaurant. She wore an elegant green velvet dress with her hair pulled up into an elegant twist. On her head, she wore a small headpiece that contained both the green and the black fabrics, seamlessly uniting her attire. Finally, he felt close enough to his young love that he could inquire without offending. Placing his hand gently on hers, he finally asked the question that had been on his mind for so long.
Melody, my love, I don't mean to. May I ask why you wear that ribbon around your neck?
Her face darkened before she quickly smiled and shakily replied, "Oh, it's just something I've always worn. Don't you like it?"
Of course I do. But I'd love to see your beautiful neck uncovered, my dear. Your sweet, soft skin.
"I'm sorry, my love." She took her hand from his, running the tips of her fingers along the fabric as if consoling the ribbon itself, or confirming the bow remained tight.
Will you tell me about it?
The smile remained, but her eyes didn't sparkle. "There's nothing to tell." In the days that followed, he desperately tried to stop thinking about the ribbon, but it ate away at him. He kept no secrets from his darling lover, yet there was something she refused to share, a part of her that remained unknown. Shortly after they became engaged, a member of Peter's extended family passed away, and Melody left town with her partner to attend the funeral. They rented a room in a small inn, and for the first time, shared a bed. They kissed and cuddled by the light of the fire until they fell asleep. In the morning, they were quietly packing their things when Melody timidly spoke, as if the words had weighed her down all morning. "My love, I'm afraid I slept quite terribly. I barely slept at all." Peter was taken aback, as he'd slept soundly through the night.
I'm so sorry, dear. Did you not enjoy sharing the bed?
"Oh, I loved falling asleep in your arms, but I woke up in the middle of the night. I'd had such a terrible dream." He could tell she was truly upset and wrapped his arms around her. "I was sleeping when I felt your fingers slide underneath my ribbon, trying to pull it off, picking at the knot. I begged you to stop, but you wouldn't. I could barely breathe. You were choking me." She was overwhelmed with emotion and buried her face into his chest. Peter didn't dare mention that he, too, had the very same dream. His eyes shifted from the ribbon to his hands, to the shadows on her neck around the ribbon. Marks, or a trick of the light. Their wedding day arrived, and Peter secretly wondered if this would be the day he waited for. But as she walked down the aisle in her glowing white dress, the dark black velvet circled her neck as it always did. After several hours of eating, drinking, laughing, and dancing with friends, the couple rode in a coach to the honeymoon suite at the finest hotel in town. Both bride and groom were drunk and in love, kissing each other with no care for the coachman, ready to take each other in. Peter excused himself for a shower, and his new wife made herself comfortable in their extravagant suite. He returned to find her lying across the bed in a red velvet nightgown. The dark fabric emphasized her in the most perfect places. Her plump, juicy lips curved upwards invitingly, and her eyes glimmered from between falling black locks. But still, his focus was on the ribbon, and the building lust evaporated. If there were ever a time he wanted to see and smell and kiss the soft skin of her neck, it would be tonight. She seemed to notice, and her smile dropped ever so slightly. He wouldn't risk spoiling the evening by asking her to remove it. He climbed into bed with her for the second time ever, and she held out her arms. He kissed her deeply and ran his hands up and down the soft fabric along her back. Hello, husband.
I love you, my dearest.
I love you, darling. Their eyes locked, and the love was true, but he couldn't help it, and his attention drifted once again to the ribbon. She sighed and sat back, sinking in disappointment. Do you want me to untie the bow? Peter lit up. He never thought the day would come when she would offer him what he desired most. After all this time, this is what you want of me.
Yes, my love.
Then do what you wish. With a smirk, he forcibly fingered the knot, but it was unyielding. She remained still as he fetched a pair of scissors from the desk and returned with enthusiasm, practically giddy. And in one swift move, he slid the cold metal blade between her velvety skin and the fabric and snipped. Then he screamed, stumbled back from the bed and onto the floor, as her head toppled from her shoulders and rolled across the room.
Thank you for joining us around the fire. For more information or to make a donation, please visit randomactsnetwork.com. Now, want to hear a scary story?
The clutch of pain starts when you open your eyes. It's like your heart is trying to climb out of your body, like it turned into that chest burster in Alien, like a rubber band stretched until it snaps against your lungs. You got good at describing it to doctors back when you still saw them. They all said the same thing: stress angina, not intense enough for prescription tablets. According to them, you should stop the stress to stop the pain. Your shoulders hunch up towards your ears and your spine pulls taut, and that's it. You're awake. The rain is coming down outside. Another great day in Chicago. You live at the beginning of the bus line, so there's always a seat. Only problem is all the people who get on after you. The bus is steamed up with sweat and water after only a couple of stops. A kid presses next to you. A young man? Are you too old to not think of him as a kid? Whatever. He's got badly fitted earbuds and the sound of his sports podcast is leaking all over you. Excuse me. You get jostled by his bony knee as he moves it into your seat, but it's probably accidental. Excuse me. He looks down at you like he just realized you were there. What? He yells over the podcast hosts. You deflate. What's the point of asking him to turn it down or give you room anyway? It's not like he's doing either thing on purpose. He's taller than you. He needs the space. You can put your own headphones on if you don't want to hear his media. Inside your chest, the claws scratch harder. It feels different today. You wonder if it's a throat infection and decide it's not allowed to be. Today, the temp agency has sent you to cover an executive assistant post at a law firm. That means secretarial stuff and probably getting to sit down. It's a good week of work, maybe more if you're lucky. Mindless, busy work. It'll help make rent. That's more than your alleged writing career's ever done. You haven't written anything in 6 months. The temp jobs put your brain through a mesh sieve every day. Nothing's left but pudding. The building's in the Loop, one of the mid-range office blocks whose visual interest is confined to their height. There's a joke somewhere about men in there. Yeah, get that scratching bitch thought out now. You've got to go upstairs and flatter some lawyer's ego. You don't have to mean it, but she'd better believe you do. The temp agency makes a big deal of client feedback, and they already did you a favor taking on someone with an MFA. Neck is getting worse, like the claws in your chest are moving up towards your mouth. Take 3 ibuprofen before you go in. Guzzle them down with black coffee. Did you eat this morning? No. Shit. It's too late. The coffee's already making friends with the lining of your stomach. Turn your handbag so the rip in the flat is against your sweater. Gotta look professional. Shoulders are still hunched up. Try to relax them. Feels like someone's gripping you from behind, but of course no one is. Shit. It's later than you thought. Shit. Run inside. Gotta get to the 10th floor. The middle doors in the elevator bank are already open, and the compartment's empty. What a relief. You'll make it exactly on time? Shit. A hand trips the red electronic eye in the doors as they close. Some older guy. He's got gray suit and a blue tie and an iPad the size of Lincoln Park. He's reading the newspaper on it. It's okay. He's pressing 14. You'll get off first. Suit guy looks at his watch as the doors close. Frowns, looks at the elevator keypad. He pulls his ID forward on an elastic lanyard, presses it against the black square above the floor buttons. The keypad lights up as he triggers an override and then resets to no floors selected. He presses 14. "Excuse me," you say politely, reaching forward to press 10 again. "I'm sorry, I'm already late for an important meeting," he says, blocking your hand without looking up from his electronic times. "You can ride down once I get off." You can make a fuss about this, but by the time you've thought of something to say, he's getting off at 14. 10 minutes late," says this week's boss without preamble. She's got a nice office. Lots of little award plaques. You've got a desk in its corner with someone else's family photo on it. "Your temp agency usually sends us punctual staff. Don't do it again." When you ask about lunch around noon, she looks at you in disbelief. "I expect you to work the job, not the hours. We've got to make up for lost time. Read that subpoena text back to me." You weren't hungry anyway. The pain in your chest is back and too distracting. Gotta get home somehow. There's 6 opioid pain pills in your medicine cabinet from that surgery 2 years ago, back when you had the copywriting job and real health care. The pills are probably still good. Won't help the angina, but they'll get rid of the shoulder pain. You didn't take all of them then because they gave you such weird dreams. But now a bunch of freaky nightmares sounds pleasant compared to your shoulders trying to lift themselves off your torso. The elevator is crowded, and it stops at every floor. Crammed face first against the steel walls, you watch your reflection. There are so many people in the compartment that a pair of bright green eyes looks almost like it's looming over your aching body. The wavery brushed metal makes the eyes look inhuman. The pupils elongated the wrong way, and the skin around them dark gray. But when you manage to look around, everyone in the elevator looks tired and normal. Get home, find the pain pills, and swallow them, with water this time. Should eat dinner, but instead, you pass out face down on the bed 3 minutes later. Your dreams live up to your expectations. You're standing on a cliff above a calm ocean, or is it a rooftop above Lake Michigan? Hard to tell. Nothing hurts in the dream, and for a moment you just enjoy that. The sky is stringy with storm clouds. All around you, things are squawking. You look with difficulty. You're in a kind of seabird nursery. Huge nests. Nests as big as a compact car, all of them filthy with white bird shit and other stains you can't as easily place. The sounds are coming from inside the nests. Look over the edge into one. Go on, do it. Broken eggshells, cream speckled with tan. Gray down and a couple of iridescent dark feathers. In the middle, a single fledgling you know is only half grown, even though it's already the size of a Labrador puppy. Its green eyes wink at you in a face of wrinkled charcoal skin. It opens its hooked yellow beak, squawks again, unhinges its jaw until you can see all the way down its shiny blue throat. It's hungry, of course. You know what to do. The fledgling gurgles as you vomit bile down into its stomach. It clicks with satisfaction when you're done and jumps onto the edge of the nest, clinging on with webbed claws so it can snuggle against your shoulder. It can't fly yet. The feathers on its wings aren't developed enough. Soon, though. The alarm goes off on your phone. Today, the pain in your shoulders is just as bad, but simultaneously also more bearable. The ache is yours as much as your body is. The fluttering feeling in your chest is more reassuring than not. Stroking, not shaking your heart. Maybe the angina's finally going away. It isn't. The asshole with the tablet gets on the elevator with you and pulls his override stunt again. The two of you aren't even late this morning. He's just being a dick. When you realize it, you feel the wings beat violently against your chest. The claws grip harder on the ridge of your shoulders. "That a new secretary?" someone asks your boss that afternoon. "Temporary, thank God," she answers. "The usual girl comes back next week." You look at the pencils on your desk as they talk. A hooked beak no one can see tweaks your earlobe, strops itself on your earrings. Webbed feet clutch and release delicately along your clavicle. This is your imagination. There is nothing riding your shoulders, nothing inside your chest. You excuse yourself, go to the ladies' room and check. Nothing in the mirrors. Nothing moves under your fingers when you pat your shoulders hesitantly. This is some kind of post-opioid hallucination. The fact that it started before you took the damn pills is irrelevant. At leaving time, you squash into the elevator, stare at the green eyes above your steel reflection again. You can see the long snake neck clearly now below them. The bird clacks its evil beak at you reassuringly. Someone else bumps into you as the elevator stops, and their arm goes right through the bird, like it's smoke. Just get home, just get home. Headphones on the bus. Some comedy news podcast, the kind you thought you'd write for. Don't look into the metal poles. Stare out the glass windows. Nothing's reflected in those but your own exhausted face. The bird chirps as you get off. Do an image search on horrible, giant gray bird, hooked beak, webbed feet. It's a cormorant, a giant cormorant. Which is funny because until you looked for it online, you would have sworn you didn't know what that is or even if it was a bird at all. Maybe your subconscious remembered seeing one in a zoo or something. Maybe your mother was scared by one when you were in the womb. Who the fuck knows? The microwave in your studio kitchen is stainless steel. You shine it hard for 5 minutes, take a breath, look into your watery reflection to check your bird identification skills. No cormorant, nothing, just the residual pain in your shoulders where it clutched. For a minute, you're so relieved you feel weightless. Then the shuddering starts again. Wings beating against the inside of your chest. You get a chair, stand on it, look at your breasts in the steel. They're shaking with the force of the bird trapped in your rib cage. As you watch, the thing inside your body travels up until it's out from under your skin. It's leering at you from your shoulders again. 3 pain pills tonight. No dreams, just the dark sound of waves and the distant cries of seabirds. A woman tries to sit next to you on the bus to work. The bird takes one look at her and hisses, snapping at her face. She looks confused. You stare straight ahead, poker-faced. She finds another seat. Nobody sits next to you today, even when the bus fills up. The bird croons in pleasure. Your temporary boss looks surprised when you get up at noon. "Where are you?" "Lunch," you say calmly. "Look, what's your name? I don't have time for your bullshit today. Sit back down. I want to hear that deposition again." The bird finally bursts out of your chest and into your whole body. Its beak is your beak, its wings frame your ears. You scream together as 1,000 colors of red you couldn't see before spray across the desk of the woman whose throat you've just ripped apart. Dip into her blood and taste it, your tongue blue. You skipped breakfast this morning. You need to eat before you take the next step. Leave her office, shut the door gently, walk along the hall, claws silent on the carpet. No one's around. Good. That saves time. Get to the elevators, press the up button. You need to get to the roof. When the doors open, there's only one person in it. Your lucky day. It's the dick with the tablet and the override ID. Hold his neck up to the keypad. He has roof access. Better deal with what's left of him on the ride up. No point in wasting food. Just throw the bones up before they scratch your gullet. Don't want indigestion while you're flying. The top of the building is windy. You hop to the edge of the flat roof. Look north over Lake Michigan. There's an electrical storm waiting for you there. And beyond that, the island with the giant cliff-top nests. Stretch out those wings. The fledglings are waiting.